All right, guys. This is a little bit unexpected. I wasn't planning on doing a Facebook Live today, but there's been, I don't know how to say this, gotten a lot of questions, a whole lot of questions lately, and just a lot of people who are looking for answers. They're looking for different solutions. They're not really getting the satisfactory answers that they're looking for. And unfortunately, we live in a time where there's a lot of confirmation bias if you look for it. So if you feel that your brand or your vehicle or what your opinion is right, you're going to find people who will agree with you. And whether that's anything, that could be religion, politics, or racing, it doesn't matter. If you look, you'll find someone who agrees with you, and you'll find some evidence to go, see, look, I'm right. Here it is. I really struggle with that because I'm always looking for. I'm super skeptical, personally. I always take things with a grain of salt. I never really jump on something and go, oh, okay, here it is, gospel doctrine. I'm always looking for, affirmations and evidence to back up stuff. So, why on earth am I saying this? It's kind of a cardinal rule that you should never read the comments in YouTube, but I typically do, and I try to actually answer most people. If someone leaves, I try to always carry that conversation. So when we produce a video, there's always just an avalanche of people asking questions. So I try to take it upon myself, whether it's me or some of our staff who have access to the account, to go in and ask questions or answer questions, excuse me. So, and I do the same thing whenever I do a Facebook Live. I always try to jump in and answer people's questions live, or at least go back and answer them. We try to have that kind of reciprocation. So anyways, one of the big things is that for the last couple of months, we've done quite a few videos on Kawasaki. We got our hands on a 310R that we reviewed. We had one of our guys in Australia do a great review on the 310R, which hasn't really changed since its introduction in 2014. But then we also did two reviews on the all-new STX 160. We did one on the international STX 160X, and then we did one on the STX 160LX, which has sound and a few other features. Those articles and videos are live. You can go to our Facebook page and see those posts. You can go to watercraftjournal.com and read those articles and see the video, or just go to the YouTube channel and watch the video there and then link to the article. Because obviously I cannot put all the information. It's impossible. We can't put all the information on each unit in a 10-minute video. Sometimes we're trying to be 10 minutes now. That's kind of the threshold. But it's really hard just to cram all that stuff in there without just wearing people out. So that's why we try to go into further detail in the articles for every video. Unfortunately, what you come into is that there's people who are lazy, and they want everything spoon-fed to them. And I have a really hard time with that, although that is kind of the future of media consumption. So if a video doesn't per se have one or two nagging questions that a potential buyer might have, or just someone who's doing research, they more often than not they won't click the link and read the article. They'll just complain about the video, and that's tough because typically you'll find the answer in the article itself. We try to pair a video and an article together. That way you're blasted in the face with all the information you could possibly want. And if we don't have it, then either we weren't able to do it, or I screwed up, and I'll own it. If I screw up, I own it. So That being said, in several of the several of the videos, we got people complaining about the lack of technology in the Kawasaki the new STX 160 models. Our major complaint wasn't necessarily a lack of features or technology, because there actually is technology in the new STX 160X, but what we're seeing is that people simply are not familiar with changes that have happened to Kawasaki over the years. So I'm going to take a couple moments, I'm going to bring up some old articles, and I'm going to address one question, because a lot of people simply are uneducated. And then I want to talk about other brands who have also made some certain changes. First and foremost, the technological changes between the old STX 15F, and I'm only going to address the STX models by the last addendum of their name. So 15F is the old model, and then the 160X or LX. Well, there's the 160, the 160X, and then the 160LX. So I'm only going to just say the 160 or the F or the 15F, just to save me some talking. But the main changes between the 15F and the 160X, for that matter, is there's actual considerable changes. The hull itself, the intake grate itself, the ride plate and the sponsons are the same. They are the same. They have not changed since 2004, since the first 15-liter got into the STX platform. Those are the same. The pump remains relatively the same since the last change, and I believe the last change was in the late aughts. And I think it was like 2008 or 2009. They did make some minor changes to the pump, nothing significant. But changes to the engine, there are some changes to the engine, and of course to the operation system. First and foremost, let's talk about electronics. The 15F was a cable operated throttle. Okay, it was very low tech. Okay, it was electronic fuel injection, yes. So the timing and the timing curve and the injection curve and the air fuel mixture was all operated through Kawasaki's proprietary software. Okay, but throttle control was all cable operated. Okay, I'm using the wrong hand, it's left-handed, or right-handed. Wow, okay. I realize the camera's backwards, so everything on my shirt's backwards and the poster's backwards and everything. But it was analog, it was mechanical. For 2020, for the 160 models, the 160, 160X, and 160LX, it is fly-by-wire, okay? And what they have done, this is not entirely new. What they've done is that they've pulled from the changes that came with the Ultras. When the Ultras went to the 300, they went to fly-by-wire. Okay, that allowed them to have a more responsive cruise control. The cruise control is on the right. They had trim control was new. They had the slow mode and no wake mode, or they had the eco setting, and then they had their slow mode. That software was carried over, slightly improved for the engine upgrade in 2014. That's when everything went from 300 to 310. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that. But all the engine management software, all the operation software, everything that was on the supercharged 300 and 310s is now on the naturally aspirated 160s. Okay. What's really neat about that is that they actually spent a considerable amount of time on spring tension in the throttle lever, so that you feel like you get a really natural snap like you would on a cable operated throttle body. Okay, so just for people who are not mechanically inclined, your throttle, all right, if it was a cable operated system, your throttle had a cable that ran all the way to the throttle body, which would be like a carburetor, has a flap in it, okay? It dictates how much air goes in, okay? And then there is a computer module on the side of the throttle body, and it's saying, hey, the throttle is halfway open. Hey, it's all, or actually halfway would be this way, and then all the way open would be this. This is closed. Okay. So that module would say to the fuel injection, to the fuel pump and the fuel injection, hey, we're at half throttle. Hey, we're at full throttle. Hey, we're at a quarter throttle. And it would deliver as much fuel as the throttle body and the engine operate. There's a timing sensor, and so everything is cohesive. So it's saying, listen, we're spinning at this RPM, we're open at this throttle, we need X amount of fuel, and then it's also reading, hey, listen, we're dumping too much fuel or we're too lean, so it's correcting off of the sniffer, the O2 sensor. So anyways, don't want to go down the rabbit hole of that. So anyhow, that operating software, that engine management software, is on the naturally aspirated 160 models today, okay? Now, here's where you get into another one. People say the engine hasn't changed since 2004. You are wrong, all right? The engine has changed. The displacement has not changed. It is still a 1498 cc or a 1.5 liter engine. All right, it's still a 4-cylinder, it's still a 4-stroke, it's still the same displacement. All right, but changes were made. Significant changes were made to the crankcase, the cylinder, and to the cylinder head. And those were all done first in 2014. Okay, in 2014, all the supercharged jet skis they bumped from 300 to 310 horsepower, and everyone went, that's so arbitrary and that's so dumb. Why would they do that? Why would they bump up 10 horsepower? I was one of those idiots until I understood what had happened, what had changed to the engine. Okay, long time ago, 2007, all right, you had the 250, you had the 260, then you had the 300, all right? They notoriously cooked pistons, burnt valves, or just devoured fuel, all right? And they would foul spark plugs, okay? Those Ultras made power. They made a gob of power. I mean, really wrung it out. But there was some arbitration. There was a lot of engines going kaboom, okay? Now, if you took care of them, and if you were, if you're a pussycat with them, your Ultra would run great, and it would run for ages. There's guys still running 250s and 260s out there, okay? I'm not saying they all blow up. What I am saying is that they had their problems, okay? And notoriously, one of them was piston life. The pistons were a lightweight. I think at the time, the first ones were a forged. They were a cast piston. They went to a lightweight hyper-eutectic piston for a little bit, and then went back to a forged. And now with the 310s, I believe it's a cast. It's a forged piston. But regardless of the actual material, the ferrous material that they were using for the pistons, was that they were cooking. All right, those motors would boil, and the reason why they'd boil, RIVA jumped on it, and R&D Racing and a bunch of other guys got on it really quick, was that what they were really had mistakenly done was that the single cooling circuit, all right, the single cooling circuit, there was one. It pulled water from the outside. So you see, you guys were like, what the hell is Kevin talking about? Water was being pulled from the outside, ambient ocean water or lake water was being pulled, ran through the engine, and then into the intercooler, and then spat out. By the time the water had gone into the intercooler wasn't cooling because it had hot boiling water coming from the engine block. Okay? If you put your hand on the pisser, it was scalding hot because it was superheated through the engine and then into the intercooler and then out. So the intercooler, and the job of the intercooler is for, again, there's a lot of guys, you guys are like, dude, this is old news. I can't believe you're bothering. But this is for the uninitiated. The intercooler is to actually cool the intake charge before it goes into the engine. Okay? You have this compressed air from a supercharger gets hot. Okay? And hot air expands. Cool air is thick. All right? It's dense. And what you want is the coolest, densest charge in the cylinder head as much as humanly possible. Okay? Because imagine the inside of your cylinder like this. All right? It's a pocket. All right? And it's under compression. It's under load. So you have all these you have all this oxygen molecules crammed in there. Okay? They're forcing as much oxygen in there as possible. Why? Because then you embed it with fuel, all right? You embed it with a combustible material, which in this case is gasoline, all right? Those gasoline molecules hopefully have been aerated or spread out inside of that compressed pocket of oxygen. And when it's ignited, the bigger, more condensed explosion you have, the more power you make, okay? So that's why you have a supercharger. Supercharger is compressing air. And then that intercooler is trying to cool it. Because go back to high school chemistry, all right? And you think about molecules bouncing around at 1,000 miles an hour, okay? Well, if you cool it down, those molecules are slowing down. Why do you want them slow? Because if they're slow, the fuel molecule can attach to the air molecule, all right? They attach, all right? It's wetting. So suddenly when that spark comes off from the spark plug, you have air molecules and fuel molecules in close proximity, and they ignite, and you have a very efficient explosion, all right? You have a very efficient charge. And the more efficient the charge, the more power you make, okay? Think about like an old ratty muscle car or hot rod that's spitting fuel out the rear. You ever seen stupid movies like Fast and Furious where you see flames shooting out of the rear? Okay? If you have flames shooting out of the rear, you have a really inefficient engine and you have all sorts of other problems, okay? Unless most lowriders and guys, they try to purposely do this by having a small fuel pisser and a sparker at the exhaust pipe, and they're artificially shooting a flame out. Cars should not naturally be shooting flames out of the rear, ever. Never, never, never. Okay, it's really bad, all right? The only time you ever see it naturally, and it's supposed to happen, is when you go to the NHRA Winter Nationals or the Gator Nationals up in Florida, and you see open zoomy, open header drag racers where the exhaust pipes are are 3 feet long, and they're a 2.5 inch or 3 inch pipe, runner, and it's shooting out, just shooting flames out of it, okay? And that's because you have a supercharger pressing 60 psi of pressure through every cylinder. I mean, just blowing massive amounts of boost, all right? Pounds, not psi. Wow, pounds. Sorry, all right? And it's just blowing fuel out of the exhaust port, okay? So, let's talk about Kawasaki's here. So they went in 2014, they realized we're cooking our engines, all right? The 250s, the 260s, and the 300s were cooking their engines. They have what's called, an engine builder will talk about internal operating temperature, okay? The internal operating temperature is tantamount to an efficient engine. If your engine is boiling, if the oil is boiling, and you're struggling to keep the oil cool, if you're, okay, then we get into heat soak. Okay, so let's say the internal operating temperature of that engine is just sky high. Okay, what does that mean? That means everything about the damn thing's hot. All right, the metal's hot, the crankcase is hot, the crank's hot, the rods are hot, the pistons are hot. Well, what happens when metal gets really hot? It softens and it expands. Okay, what happens when a piston gets too damn hot, gets cherry red? It expands so far that it actually starts grinding against the cylinder, and it can get so hot it will literally weld itself to the inside of the cylinder and explode. Okay? And that happened. It happened to guys with 250s, 260s, and 300s. Because they were going so fast, they were getting so hot that it couldn't circulate the water fast enough, and it couldn't keep its internal temperature cool enough that they were blowing motors up because the pistons would weld themselves to cylinders. I am not joking. This actually happened. Okay? So, how do you offset that? Well, you can have a better piston material, which they did, which Cowie did. They stepped into a better piston. But then they also put a fail-safe in the fuel injection system. And this was from 2007 up. Was if it started seeing that it was getting really, really hot, the ECU, the computer, the engine control unit, or ECM, engine control module, would go, holy crap, we're boiling. So it would start dumping fuel on top of the piston, all right? Trying to get that fuel to cool down the intake charge, be less efficient. It's wasting fuel out of the exhaust. But it's also using the fuel as a fire extinguisher to cool off the pistons. I'm not joking. This is a failsafe in a lot of engine management software. In fact, I've never seen engine management software to not have that in there. Okay? It's a Hail Mary. It's something to go, holy crap, we're melting. What do? I don't know. Hose it down with fuel. Because it can't burn all that fuel, so it's just going to push it out of the exhaust valve and out of the exhaust pipe. And that's what a lot of Cowies were doing. So Kawasaki goes, okay guys, we got to fix this. So they do a couple things in preparation for 2014. Okay. Number one, they include a second cooling circuit. So it's pulling water from the outside of the hull in through the engine block and then pissing it straight out. Then it has its own cooling circuit for the intercooler. So the intercooler gets its own nice cold water. Prior to then, R&D Racing, Bill Chapin and Glenn, those guys were some of the first. RIVA figured it out too, really fast. At the time, their Band-Aid was to reverse the cooling circuit. So instead of going to the engine first and then into the intercooler, it went into the intercooler first and then into the engine. That's a lot smarter, okay? That's a smart move. By 2014, Cowie said, screw it, let's have two cooling circuits, all right? One for the engine and one for the intercooler. Great, makes sense, perfect. Radically drops engine operating temperature, all right? Well, actually, it's radically improving efficiency because your intercooler is now working at peak performance, okay? That's number one. Number two, how do we cool the engine better? All right, well, having its own circuit, that's great. That doesn't really change how things did before. But they went in and they opened all of the water jackets in the engine, okay? For people who don't know, an engine has its own circulatory system, just like you do, okay? It circulates cold water or cool water through it, trying to cool off the engine, all right? What I'm going to talk about something else. Okay, heat soak is what happens when the metal in the engine itself is soaking in heat. And it gets so hot that the metal in the engine itself starts heating everything else. starts heating up the oil, starts heating up the pistons, starts heating up the rings on the pistons, heats up everything, okay? Starts cooking the bearings. Oh, God, okay. Woo! Then you have that, all right? So, what do? They open up all the water jackets, which means they have to recast the engine. Understand, a four-stroke jet ski engine, Kawasaki, Sea-Doo, Yamaha, all right? Honda, Polaris, all of them. It's a three-part engine, okay? There is a crankcase, there is a cylinder, and then there is a cylinder head, okay? High-performance guys always talk about cylinder heads. Oh, yeah, cylinder heads. Okay, great. But the crankcase and the cylinder itself was all redesigned and recast to have larger water jackets. So a larger volume at a better velocity, higher speed, of water could move through the engine faster. Could go in, try to suck some of that heat out of the engine block, and then spit out as fast as possible. So it's trying to evacuate heat, all right? That's number one. Number two, they opened up all the oiling circuits, all the oil jackets, all right? So it had better oiling. Then they also had something called proprietary oiling, okay? Proprietary oiling, sorry, that's the wife texting me. Proprietary oiling says the places that need the oil first, cold, cool oil first. It's not cold, it's all relative, but cooler on a scale, all right? Cooler oil gets to the places that need it the most, okay? Number one, crankcase, all right, to the crankshaft. And these are the bearings, because your crankshaft floats on bearings on main journals, okay? And that's your highest friction point. Well, yeah, for the most part, it's your highest friction point, okay? Because it's metal on metal. And it's a very thin coat of oil keeping that crankshaft from welding to the bearing, and that bearing from welding to the main journals, okay? So oil went there first. Number two, well, I keep saying number one, number two. Okay, the second step of that proprietary oiling change, and this is all done in 2014, was that they installed what are called under piston jets or under piston oiling. Okay, the Hellcat Charger, the Hellcat Hemi motors have dual jets that literally piss. This sounds terrible. That squirt to the underside of the piston, all right? And the piston has a skirt, all right? They call it a skirt. There's a lot of phraseology here that some people are going to roll their eyes at, but it's true, all right? The piston skirt, they're spraying the underside of the piston, and they're literally spraying up the skirt of the piston, okay? This isn't new technology. This is old technology. Hell, Shelby was doing this with the GT40s back in, well, the original side oiler. The side oilers didn't have under piston spraying in '66, but the Bosses had under piston oiling. So the Boss 428s and the Boss 429s. I'm not a Ford guy. I barely know some of this engine tech. But the original 427s that were in the GT40s, you know, the movie that just came out, which is fantastic, by the way. Ford versus Ferrari, great movie, really, really good. They were using the 427 side oiler, which literally had a large oil journal that ran down the, was it the passenger side of the engine? And that proprietary oiled the crank and then the cylinders for the pistons. Kawasaki, in this sense, created a side oiler engine. Okay, just basically like a half of a 427 Ford. In that, it was giving proprietary oil to the crankshaft, and then it was also employed under piston sprayers that literally sprayed up inside of the piston, inside of the sleeves, so that it was coating and lubricating the cylinders. Okay, that is imperative, because what they did and I'm going to bring up my original article from 2014 when all these changes were made to the engine. Okay, thanks to drastically improving engine oiling, reducing heat soak, we talked about that, and maintaining constant lower internal engine temperatures throughout the engine's linear power band. So whether you're cruising in a no-wake zone or ringing it out doing the Long Beach to Catalina offshore race, it was maintaining a dramatically reduced engine operating or internal operating temperature and engine oiling management. Okay, so thicker water jackets, larger oil passages, quicker oil return, and they did a couple other things with the oil pan and the pickup, so that they could scavenge or retrieve oil faster and process it faster. Okay. Cool, and then they had there's dual under piston oiling. My mistake. Okay. Proprietary oiling or priority oiling? Oh. Sorry, Brad. It is priority oiling, not proprietary. It is priority oiling. Wow. Thank you for calling me out on that one. I mean, yes, it is priority oiling. Ugh. Proprietary. Sorry, it's priority oiling. Thank you. Yes, lightweight cast pistons with an additional ring land with V grooves. Okay, so they had a cast piston, but they redesigned it with a additional oil ring. All right, and so if you ever seen a piston, oh, I got something for you. This is a little trophy I've had since 2008. All right, this is a true Hemi piston. This is what you would run in like a Keith Black, dry block, top fuel, 6,000 horsepower engine. Okay, and yes, it is coated, and that's why you have this weird green color. Okay, and these are valve reliefs. Now it's a Hemi motor, so that means that your piston, your intake and your exhaust valves are actually on a hemispherical dome. They're contrary in each other. Okay, so here's a good visual. Okay, but why do we have all these little lines? Okay, all these little cuts in here. All right, these are ringlands. Okay, I say ringland. I say it too fast. All right, but if you can look in the camera, you're going to see little holes here. Okay, this is your oil ringland. Okay, oil comes up. It oils the rings as it goes up and down. Okay, it's trying to reduce friction. Okay, so these are important. What Kawasaki did is they added an extra ringland. I got to say it right. All right, so that it has less of a chance to fuse or weld itself to the cylinder walls. Okay, so what goes into casting an engine? What goes into actually casting a new engine? Several $100,000. That's the truth. Okay, you have to literally design or basically take whatever your engine block is, and I don't care if we're talking about top fuel Hemi motors or small block Chevys or a 1.5 liter Kawasaki 4-cylinder. Okay, it does not matter. It's all the same. All right, you go and you modify that engine block. You make a template. Then you have to make a sand casting from it. All right, which is a mold. Then you cut that casting apart. You make a hard cast. All right, then you make a permanent mold from which all other castings are made from. Okay, so then they make a permanent mold or a permanent sand cast that has all the ports and everything in it, and you pour molten whatever metal you're using. You're using a highly porous iron block, or you're making an aluminum block, or making something really wild. You can use this, all sorts of different kinds of metals, but you have to cast that block, and in the process of casting that block, you literally break up the sand mold, and you have to make another one, and you're doing this one by one by one by one by one. All right, it is a very grueling process. Okay, So in order to R&D, develop, remold, and then recast, and then, oh, here's the fun part. You have to retool for all the new engines. What does retooling mean? That means you have to change all of your preset parameters, change all your tools to cut and manufacture that engine the same every single time for however many more of those engines you plan on making, okay? It's a very expensive process. So I have a guy here who literally says the engine is pretty much the same since 2004. No, you're not. It is radically different. It's radically different, but yet maintains the same CC displacement. It maintains all the same motor mounts and external mounts. You can change the guts. You can change the internal architecture of that engine without changing the outside. Okay? That's a smart engine builder. All right? You can do that. It's not tough. So they made all these changes to the Kawasaki engine for the 2014 model. The naturally aspirated machine has all those upgrades. All right, better oiling, priority oiling, better cooling. It doesn't have an intercooler, but it has its own circuit, and all these other changes that were made for optimal engine efficiency, longevity, and making sure that motor stays together. Okay, now it's important to note that Yamaha and Sea-Doo have done similar things over the years. They address certain problems. Notoriously, about 10 years ago, maybe, I think it was resolved around 2014, 14 or 15. No, I think it was 2016 when they made the change. Was in the mid-teens, Yamaha was having timing chains break. Okay, the timing chain that's on the front of the engine, that from the crank, there is a wheel, a daisy wheel, and that toothed gear ran the chain that spun the camshafts. Okay, at the time they were running a single chain, and the single chain, especially with guys who are doing performance mods, who are spinning the RPM, who are really ringing it out, or just frankly were really aggressive riders on the SVHO engines, they were snapping timing chains. Okay, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. It didn't happen as often as the internet would want you to believe, but it was still a big deal, especially for performance guys and racers. Okay, the race team, they're all pulling their hair out because they're like, dang dude, we're all Yamaha racers and we keep snapping chains and eating motors. Because what happens when the chain snaps? All right, the crank's still moving, and that crank is moving the pistons up and down, but the cams, the twin camshafts, are opening up and closing the valves at the wrong time, and so those valves are smacking into the tops of the pistons. Here, I'm going to pull the pistons out. All right, that piston is not supposed to come up to top dead center with the valve all the way down, or it's going to smash into it. All right, and that is, of course, if the tolerances are too tight. Okay. And that's what was happening. The guys were snapping valves and smashing pistons into valves, and they were grenading their motors. Okay, so what did Yamaha do? Yamaha went in and they said, "Hey, listen, we got to go to a double roller timing chain," and they changed it to this really thick timing chain, and they haven't had a problem since. Okay, it's an upgrade that a shop can do. I believe it ended up not being a warranty item because there wasn't enough to validate the expense of having everyone with an SVHO engine come in and have it changed. I know it's going to piss off a bunch of people, but that is business, okay? Oh my gosh, I'm supporting the OEs. Yes, I'm supporting the OEs in this decision. When it comes to a recall, they have to look at the numbers and go, are there enough failures in order for us to have every single person who bought one of these products come in and us pay to have it repaired or changed, preemptively change it. So that was the issue with the SVHO engines. And the SVHO engine continues to today and is killer. okay? For Rotax and BRP, what they did was in 2016, they radically changed their cylinder head, all right? And they changed their supercharger. There were slight changes made to the crankcases, but nothing that were monumental, all right? And it definitely delineated itself from the previous 1503 Rotax, all right, 3-cylinder 4-stroke, all right? When it came to the 300 ACE motor, I always say ACE 300, but people keep correcting me and saying 300 ACE. When it came to the 300 horsepower motor, which, hey, just so you know, I get dyno sheets, okay? I get dyno sheets. I've seen the dyno sheets for all 3 of the big horsepower motors, all right? The Kawasaki makes, like, I think it peaked at like 310.1, okay? And then I got the dyno sheet for the 300 ACE, and it was 299.87 or 88 or some stupid number. So it's like, okay, round up 300 horsepower. And then I've seen not the factory dyno sheets, but I've seen the dyno sheets from RIVA on the SVHO engine, and it was 256. Okay. And all of these, by the way, anyone who knows anything about a dyno, of an engine dyno, knows you can fudge numbers. Okay. And the way to fudge numbers is to mess with atmosphere. All right. How thick the air is, meaning how cold the air is versus how hot the air is. And you can calculate to get whatever number you want. All right. That's hyperbole. You can't really get any number you want, but you can get within the ballpark. If you say, hey, listen, I want to make 1,000 horsepower with this engine, but you're only making 290. Well, all you do is you bump the atmosphere until you get, okay, we hit 1,000. Okay, look at me, I got 1,000 horsepower engine. All right, congratulations. For Yamaha, they don't get in the horsepower wars, and that's a whole different conversation for a different day. But their number that I've seen from RIVA on their in their dyno cell is 256, and this is bone stock across the board. And what's nice about the Sea-Doo dyno sheet is that the Sea-Doo dyno sheet actually listed the barometric pressure, the air, the actual air density, the barometric pressure all the way down that sheet, and I saw that it was consistent. So it wasn't like, woohoo, one went crazy and the other ones were okay. No. They actually were legit, and they're making 300 horse. So the days of fudging those numbers are gone. They're actually legit. Okay, so let's get back to it. So Rotax, they radically changed their head design, and they come up with the ACE head. And the ACE head was first pioneered on the snowmobile motors because they were getting super efficient. They were pushing for super efficiency out of those snowmobile motors, and they simply applied the engine management software and some of their head design technology to those new cylinder heads. The new 1630 ACE motors that are across the board, and I'm actually going to show you the GTI. It's out in my backyard right now. I'm going down the rabbit hole on the engine stuff first, but I wanted to walk around the hull. Was the 1630 ACE is really neat because the 1630 ACE mechanically, between the 130 and the 170, there is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 parts differences between the 130 and the 70, okay? And I have this from Sea-Doo, I have this from RIVA, I have this from Engine Builders. It is only in the tune. You can literally get a Map Tuner X from Jerry Gaddis at Green Hulk or from Dave Bambus at RIVA, plug in a Map Tuner, and make your 130 a 170 like that. There's no difference. In fact, their tune, which is really neat, actually finds more efficiency in the tune, and you can take a 170 and bump it to 180 just through better efficiency, better timing. It leans out the fuel curve a little bit, but not to the point that it's pre-detonating or pinging. You can still run 87 octane and still gain another 10 horsepower. So there's some really trick stuff going on right there, okay? I like that kind of stuff. This stuff excites me. I like that kind of junk. So maybe you guys are bored out of your mind, but I think it's really interesting. And then the differences in the supercharger are for a different conversation. I've actually been talking to Jerry Gaddis about the lifetime Sea-Doo supercharger. There's some really neat little tricks, and Jerry is going to announce that. And my understanding is this is my understanding. I might be telling tales out of school, but Jerry's going to start offering a rebuild service and modification service for the new Ace 300 superchargers, and that's going to be really exciting. So you're going to see that coming soon too. So let's see. I talked about Cowie, mentioned the Yamaha and the Sea-Doo. So I think we've addressed everything. Oh, hey, just as a teaser, real quick, we're doing the video on our long-term test. Wake Pro 230 goes live tonight at midnight Central Standard Time. So if you're a night owl and you want to see how our 230 horse Wake Pro held up, check it out. It's kind of a year recap of that machine. We had a lot of fun with it. Really enjoyed it. It's kind of a natural tendency for people to be like, "Oh, why did you get the 300 or the RXPX?" And first, it's kind of our job to review everything. So, and that we wanted something a little more family friendly, not so hot roddy. And the Wake Pro did not disappoint. We were actually really, really happy with it. We had a lot of fun with that machine, and I know and it's one of the better sellers that Sea-Doo has. They move every one of their wakes, whether it's the 170 or 155 previously, now the 170, and now the 230. They move every one of them because they're super popular. All right, let's talk about the GTI. I'm going to walk you guys out. I'm going to take this off the tripod. We're going to walk out, and we're going to look at the leaving the home office. And let me change the camera. Okay, here we go. Here is our 2020 GTI. This is the SE 170, okay? And it has the 1630 naturally aspirated, the Ace 1630 motor in it, okay? And what we're gonna focus on today is really the hull, okay? We really want to talk about the hull. And let's show inside of this machine so that you guys can get a good look. And I'm going to put this here. Oh, just lost the camera. Here we go. It rained a little yesterday, as you can see in the walls are full of leaves and water. So the deck itself is CM Tech, all right? Has this nice finished, it's kind of chalky. I compared it to finished drywall, but it has a really nice smooth finish, okay? That no longer, gets fiberglass in your hands and just fills you up with all that crap. Let's walk around because the sun's glaring down. All right, trying to find some exposed hull, and I am failing a little bit, but you're gonna see, here we go. Here's a good example. Right here, you're looking at ribbing. See all these ribs in the Polytec hull? All right, that honeycomb ribbing that you're seeing is all structural support to keep the Polytec from flexing. It'll, a Polytec like on a Spark will flex or actually oil can a little bit. And this does not do that because it's all reinforced and webbed underneath. All right. Now, this is the new Polytec 2.0. And what that means is that the Polytec 2.0 has fiberglass runners that run the length of the hull. And that is, or I should say stringers, like a sailboat. And those stringers add all sorts, well, besides the fact that it's twice as thick as traditional Polytec, it's actually half an inch thick, which is really durable. I mean, it's really, really stout. Yeah, By the way, people were asking me to do the scratch test. I'm scratching the hell out of this. And you can't tell. All right? So no, it's not soft plastic. It's not crap. All right? It's actually really durable. It has a really nice finish to it. Okay? Nice textured finish. But what I want to talk about is the hull design. Okay? The hull design, if I can, it's going to be a little hard to do this. You're going to see how flat my driveway is. Not very flat. Crap. Okay. Let's see if I can see the screen here, because I want to point out things. Okay. So let's talk about hull design. All right. First, it's a 17-degree dead rise. All right. That means that the angle of the V is not nearly as aggressive as that of the ST3. So the ST3 has a real prominent keel, you know, this blade-like keel that runs up the center of it. Obviously, you can see this is a lot smoother. It's almost flat right here, okay? These are splash deflectors. What you see here, that's to keep water from blowing up and hosing you down. So these are splash deflectors. This isn't much in the way of traction. It's more in the way of just rider comfort, okay? Now, what you are seeing here, let me go around the other side. I'm rolling around on the ground here. What you're gonna see here, which I really like, all right, these are lifting strakes that run the whole length, okay? This lifting strake actually has a step in it. That stepped lifting strake was first seen on the S3 hull, which was introduced in 2010, all right, and was phased out when the 2018s came out, all right? You know, they had the stepped hull. It kind of was like an offshore Donzi or an offshore cigarette boat. These lifting strakes are basically what Yamaha makes all their money on. They have a pair of lifting strakes on the GP and on the FX. And what these do, if you can if you can kind of visualize here, is that as the Sea-Doo is riding at a slower speed, it's a series of steps, okay? So you're gonna see it typically riding in this area. And then this outside chine is a little bit sharper than you would get previously, okay? And a sharper chine like this means that it's not going to roll into the water as easily. A very soft, rounded chine lets the watercraft roll in, okay? A sharp one kind of keeps it from doing that. That gives you stability. That's your stability, all right? You want to look for this for stability. If you guys look at a Fish Pro, if you look at any of the ST3s, they got an almost 90-degree chine right here, all right? So anyway, let's get back to this. So as the watercraft is running, all right, and let's see if anyone can see what the hell I'm doing, but sorry. But as it's running at a moderate speed, it's going to stay within this area. As it picks up speed, the comes out of the water. Oh my gosh, I'm all over the place on this. This is terrible camera work. All right, well, shoot. Sorry, guys. Sorry. All right. So as it comes out of the water, as it picks up speed, it's elevate out of the water, and from this point down. All right. This is a moderate chine right here. Now, because it doesn't run the whole length, you'll see that down here it flattens out. Here, I'll literally roll. I'll roll over. And you can see towards the end, that this leading chine fades in and flattens out, okay? A flat surface, especially towards the tail, is what gives a watercraft its playfulness. It lets the tail slide out and you can do 360s and goof off in that direction. But what's important is this lifting strake that runs the entire length, okay? Because then, as you go even faster, this becomes a lifting strake and you're running on this surface down, okay? If you can imagine, you're only running on about 1.5 feet of running surface. And as you go top speed and you're on glass, you're gonna be on a few inches here in the middle, okay? And this is a very rounded, very soft keel. So why do you do that? Why do you want that? Okay, or why is that a good thing? That is good for being able to roll and maneuver at speed. Now you'll see, like on the STX and on the T3, I said STX, on the ST3 and the T3 has a very narrow keel, a very narrow running surface, okay? But then it actually flattens into more of a rounded surface here, okay? And that works to allow a good cutting or a good plowing bow angle, but then offer a little bit more control and maneuverability here in the rear. So this hull design is actually really this hull design is actually going to be a pretty successful one. And I think you're going to see a lot of guys have some really good enjoyment out of this hull design. Now here's where it gets a little interesting. Let me turn around. Okay, so I'm going to pull the selfie stick out here. All right, so one of the more interesting things is that all Sea-Doos, besides the Spark, so the GTI and the ST3 and the RXPX, they all share, believe it or not, the same intake grate. All right, they all use the same intake grate. And I just had a really neat conversation, and I'm not going to reveal too much because there's going to be some really neat reveals and some more stuff coming out soon. But because the GTI and effectively the GTR 230 same intake grate as the ST3, development on a really neat intake grate, performance intake grate from RIVA is coming soon, all right, or a few months out. But it's going to be really bitching, all right. I've been talking to a lot of guys and asking the right questions and getting the right answers, and we're really excited that there's some development happening here. Now, why is an intake grate a big deal? All right, a lot of guys don't know why. And the reason being is that an intake grate, for the most part, controls your traction. All right, an intake grate can really make or break a hull design. And the ST3, a really good hull design. And guys are getting killer speed out of the ST3. But it's still not as predictable in chop and in cross chop and a lot of variant water conditions as many people would like it to be. So what do? All right. Well, my original response was to put the RIVA sponsons on, and we talked in great detail about the RIVA sponsons, okay, and what they do and how they operate. But ultimately it wasn't a home run. It wasn't this fixed it, you never have to worry about it again. It did a really good job, and it made me love my RXTX 300 all over again. But there was just still a little left on the table, and that would be in the form of an intake grate. Because an intake grate, and let's actually turn the camera around. I'm going to show you the GTI intake grate. All right. You close the selfie stick again. This is going I expected it to be. All right. Here's the intake, and it is a top loader. It's a staggered scoop here in the center. All right, so that you're getting a little bit of a stagger here. Okay, they're not perfectly lined up, but this intake grate is what happens at water. Here, let me back up. Water runs up the surface and caught right here and pushed. You see how it's angled up? That water goes all the way up and runs the top of the tunnel right there, the pump tunnel, and then it hits the prop. Okay, that's a good intake grate because the previous versions don't even have the blades. All right, this will be what you would call a top loader intake grate. So, all right, we're gonna do this one more time. Turn back around. Okay, camera says that I'm sideways, but I don't believe it. Let's see. Oh. Well, all right. Well, I'm doing it this way. So that top loader intake grate is helping to bite down that water, or really adhere itself to the water surface. So it's basically like having really sticky tires on a car. Okay, you're getting all your traction depends upon that intake grate. All right, and the more aggressive the intake grate, the better the traction you get. So if you have a really aggressive, gnarly bite on there, it's gonna pull the tail of that ski down and you're gonna really hook, okay? Here's the problem though. What happens when you really bite down traction-wise? You actually scrub speed, okay? So here's the challenge. The challenge is, how do I improve traction while maintaining my top speed? Or can I, okay? Because in many cases, a lot of performance guys, racers, they'll try to up their traction as much as humanly possible, but when they do that, they scrub some top speed. Then they just improve the top end speed through engine tuning and a prop and other tricks of the trade, so that their overall top speed is improved. Okay, and that's kind of the trick to the case. So when it comes to what's going to happen here, what to expect in the coming months, is that we're going to see an intake grate that's been tested for the last year and a half. Some racers have been involved with it, and you're going to see a lot of really neat gains come out. Let's put this back on the tripod. You're going to see some really neat gains coming out of Sea-Doo riders. So that is basically, oh my gosh, this camera is totally sideways. Let's close this out. Anyhow, so I'm going to leave it here. I can't tell if I'm in the camera frame right or not. Kind of sucks. But anyhow, that's really what I wanted to talk about, guys. There's a lot of questions that I'm sure. Anyhow, that's really what I wanted to talk about. Okay, let me put this on mute. Let's see if there's any questions without watching myself. Let's see here. Watching that. Okay. So yeah, what's better, proprietary oiling or priority? It's priority oiling. I apologize for being screwed up like that. And we're going to leave it at that. If you guys have any questions, I will come back and I will answer them. I have no problem doing that. And let's see here if we have any more. No, I think we're all good. Okay. Guys, thank you again. Is it still... It's still the best of the Watercraft engines ever built. Yeah, I don't know about that. There's some efficiency problems with the Cowie engine. And then, of course, there's there is the issue of the fact that it's at the bleeding edge. There's not much left when it comes to tuning. I know the guys at K-Speed are getting a 310 up to 77 miles an hour using just an ECU reflash and a prop. That's great. I'm interested to see how the ski handles, how the behavior changes when you start getting at that speed on an Ultra, because there's just not a lot of guys going that fast on the factory Ultra hull. So anyway, I hope that helped. I hope that was slightly informative. I hope that we were able to add a little bit to the conversation here. Guys, thank you very much. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We definitely want to get to 10,000 subscriptions. That's a big deal for us, and especially when it comes to searching online for information. We definitely want us to be able to be in that pantheon of YouTube channels. So if you are in fact a fan of the magazine and the videos we produce, really hope that we could see you on the as a subscriber to the YouTube channel. And at that point, I'm going to say goodbye. I got too much other stuff to do today. And if you want to be first to see our new video, it goes live at midnight tonight, Central Standard Time. Thanks again, guys. Thanks again for reading the magazine. Thanks for watching today. We hope you're keeping safe and you're being good, and that any ride plans for the year? My ride plan? Well, I'm going to be at Mudbug. I think I'm taking the whole family to Mudbug. Mudbug has not been canceled, and I didn't get to go last year, and damn it, I want to go. So I'm going to Mudbug this year. I believe I'm joining a couple clubs for rides. I'm doing one on the 23rd, I think, and that's a local one. I think we're going to be in Kentucky. And then as for us putting on a ride, I know we had talked. There was big talk about doing kind of an Ironman ride, just how far can you go on a tank of gas kind of ride. That hasn't really panned out because of the beaches and launches being closed. There's too many problems when it comes to that, only because if people do need fuel and GPS says, hey, this dock has fuel and that dock has fuel, and then they don't because they're closed, I think it'd just be a big problem. So unfortunately, no, we're not going to be putting on anything. But I know I'm going to be doing the Tim's Ford ride this month. Next month, I'm definitely doing Mudbug. And then I'm open for invitations for fun stuff. But I'm not driving across the country to go to things. I don't think. I've been invited to go do all the stuff in New Jersey. And quite frankly, you'd have to hold a gun to my head to make me go to New England right about now with everything that's going on. No offense to you guys, but your governors suck. But anyway, yeah, so I hate to say it, my schedule kind of changed much like everyone else's did when all this stuff went south. So yeah, if you know of any good rides happening, I don't think I'll be venturing out of the Southeast for this year. I'm trying to get my hands on a couple other units for some testing. I know I'm going down to Yamaha to see some really neat stuff for the next few months. We're going to have some video that we're going to be doing. I'm going to be doing about four videos in like 2 days. So that's going to be a hell of a trip. But no, other than that, I don't have much else scheduled out. So anyway, all right, guys, I'm going to sign out. Thanks again. We'll talk soon. And, oh, hey, no, I already told you about the video. Okay, good. All right. Thanks again, guys.